Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I'm delighted to be joined from Kidderminster in the Midlands by Labour's Deputy Leader, Tom Watson. Tom, good to see you. So Labour now completely formally signed up for the UK remaining in a customs union. When are you going to formally sign up for Norway status and membership of the single market?
Well, look, the problem I think we have with this debate and with the negotiations, Robert, is everyone says there's a particular model. There's a Norway model, there's a Turkish model. What we want is a UK model that benefits UK citizens and businesses. And, you know, just picking up on what Nigel Dodd said, you know, we've always been consistent that we think that a customs union is the right thing to go for in negotiations because that protects businesses. And on your point on single market, we've always said we want the benefits of the single market because we want frictionless trade because that protects jobs. And I was just again what Nigel said, I was very interested in what he said. We think that restating our commitment to a customs union, and we know there is a lot of interest in that because of this issue of the border in Northern Ireland. We think that's the only way that you can have decent borders between the south and the north. And I'm interested how Nigel thinks that there's an alternative to that.
Will Labour back Anna Soubry, Nicky Morgan's amendment that would force the government to keep open the option of a customs union?
We haven't made our decision on what our voting strategy will be when the legislation comes back to Parliament. We've not seen what the government are going to bring to us, but obviously their position is very close to Labour's position, but that decision will be taken further down the line.
And if there is a vote that goes your way, and it very much sort of blows up the government's direction, do you think at that point it's important for Labour to start arguing for a second vote on the whole issue of leaving the EU?
Look, our position is really clear. We're leaving the EU. We've triggered Article 50. Where we disagree with the government is the principles that underpin our negotiating strategy. And we want to make sure that we have the strongest negotiating team at Europe. Now, obviously, if the Prime Minister cannot carry a majority for the significant decisions that are being made in the country's name, then that will be a very difficult situation she finds herself in. I hope we could get to a point where the government listen to us. They understand that it's reckless for them to rule out any form of customs union. You know, we don't know what the impact of that is because the government haven't conducted their own impact assessments or looked at the economic impact of leaving any form of customs union. We think that that's reckless, and we hope that we could convince Theresa May and her team that they should have a little bit more evidence before they make these very hard decisions.
Now, with Ian McNicol quitting as General Secretary of the Labour Party, you're pretty much the last centrist. You're almost unique. You're almost the last centrist in the position of any power in the Labour Party. How does it feel to be almost extinct?
Well, I'm having great fun in the position of Deputy Leader and Shadow Culture Secretary, and I'm very proud of my friend Ian McNicol. You know, he's one of our longest-serving General Secretaries. He's done 7 years. He's got through 3 general elections. That's a heavy load for any organiser to carry. And I know that he's going to stick around. He'll be a great asset.
So why did Jeremy and his allies want him out?
Well, I don't think they did want him out. I mean, I've not yet spoken to Ian this weekend, but I do know that he will have a lot, you know, he's going to be committed to the Labour movement. He's done a good job for us, and 7 years is probably enough to take the Labour Party through 7 general elections. And it's not unusual for senior officers of a party to leave just after an election because we tend to sort of commit ourselves in election cycles. And
so just to be clear, genuinely, Tom, and I must say, I find this almost impossible to believe, he didn't seek your advice about whether he should stay or go?
Oh no, Ian always talks to me about where he should go. I've just not spoken to him this weekend. I've been campaigning in Worcester and West Bromwich, and I'm actually in my mum's living room today.
So what's the real story then? What's the real story?
But let me say, I have known Ian for 30 years. I used to share a flat with him. If I've got any criticism of it at all, it's in all the time I shared a flat with him, he never did do the washing up. But I think he's made the right decision for him and his family, and I'll support him in whatever he does next.
But was it your advice that he should stay and fight or go?
It was my advice that he must do what's right for him and his family. And, you know, it does take a lot out of you, these jobs.
Now, look, who should replace him and how?
How can what, sorry?
Who should replace Ian and how?
Well, that's down to our NEC. Oh, who? Well, that's not for me to decide. The National Executive Committee will usually make these appointments, although obviously there's a discussion about how we might do the process again. Some people say...
But do you think one member, one vote?
Well, some people are saying that. It seems to me that we should, you know, one of the things that Jeremy and I did when we ran for leader and deputy was say we wanted to involve members in decision-making. You know, let's see what our NEC say. But it seems to me that member power might be one.
Sadly, we're almost out of time.
Member power might be one way these could be applied.
I'm hoping that you'll still be in the job next time we speak. And now, annoyingly, we've run out of time.
Labour's Brexit position, in the words of the Shadow Chancellor, has evolved. A pretty generous assessment of what looks like a pretty seismic shift in policy. But the party is already under pressure to go further, with a letter in today's Observer from more than 80 senior party figures, including 37 MPs, demanding that Labour commit to the single market as well as a customs union after Brexit. That is something we will, of course, be discussing with Labour's Shadow Attorney-General, Baroness Chakrabarti, who joins me now. Lovely to see you again. Very good morning. But can we start first with your visit to Yarlswood? Now, clearly, the people inside there are desperate to get out. You and the Shadow Home Secretary have been desperate for almost a year now to get inside. What did you discover?
Well, it was more than a year, actually, and I think that's the first point to make. In a democracy, should it take nearly 18 months for the Shadow Home Secretary to be allowed to visit these people who feel desperate, who feel forgotten? It's no surprise that people who are held indefinitely, so they don't know when they're going to be released, are going to be desperate. That is the policy. That's an inhumane policy that we want to end in government. But I was also concerned about aspects of the regime inside the centre. There are a number of women who say they've been on hunger strike, yet the managers of Serco, the private company that runs the establishment, flatly deny that.
Yeah, I heard there was a pretty heated discussion with a GP.
Well, and that's the other thing. There were women expressing concerns about their health care, saying that before they were detained, they had access to various medication, or they were pending operations on the outside. That all evaporates when they come in. They're told, some of them, that they are being drama queens or offered a paracetamol. When we tried to very politely, I promise you, express this to the duty doctor, the young doctor employed by G4S, a different private company profiting from this human misery, he was really incredibly defensive and angry that we should even be coming in to the establishment. And that really surprised me, because I would expect doctors to be doctors first and company employees second.
I suppose the question is there anything illegal taking place there?
Look, we went in on a supervised visit. It's very difficult for us to get under the skin of what happened in the way that undercover journalists and so on can. I think there needs to be much more transparency. I think more people, including the media, ought to be allowed regular access to these women. They're not getting proper access to decent legal advice, and that's a massive problem. So I think the policy stinks, and the establishment probably needs to be closed down in due course.
On Brexit, once again we see Labour edging closer to a very explicit position. Big speech from your leader tomorrow. What's he going to say? A customs union? The customs union?
I heard you talk about a seismic shift, which obviously is your job, because you want people to wake up on a Sunday morning and not turn off.
Particularly after the rugby result yesterday, yes.
Absolutely. I don't think you're going to get a seismic shift. I don't feel that we're in a very different place from when I last discussed Brexit with you. But what we are going to get is more flesh on the bones, as you would expect at this point in the process from, a Prime Minister in waiting. We have said that we honour the referendum result, even those of us who are passionate Remainers and campaigned in the other direction. But there is democracy, there is a result.
A customs union, the customs union, is perhaps something of a distraction anyway, given that it's just whether you sign it bilaterally or whether you sign it under a European Union framework. However, I thought a customs union would be a disaster. That's what the shadow Brexit secretary said to me, sitting in that very chair. He said that we would be a vassal state of the European Union. It actually sounds quite Rees-Moggy, to be fair.
That's the customs union rather than that's a question about making sure that you have some say about what the standards are and what rules you're living under. And that's a matter for negotiation, because you clearly don't want to be the vassal state, etc., etc. But it's incredibly important that we have a decent deal and a close partnership with our nearest neighbours. We also don't want a hard border on the island of Ireland, and that's something that we take incredibly seriously in the Labour Party, because the Good Friday Agreement was an incredibly important achievement for peace.
Sure, but what you also want is the ability to sign free trade agreements outside of your relationship with the European Union. And what happens if the EU says no?
Well, this is a matter for... Look, this is all a matter for negotiation. We know what our values are, but I have been in the room with Jeremy Corbyn when senior Europeans have been in that room, and all I can tell you is that those were very friendly rooms, because they trust us. They trust our values on environmental protection, workers' protection, human rights protection,
but
and
they know that...
What happens
if they say no?
Well, that's a matter for, that's a question of negotiation. All I'm saying is that I have no doubt in my mind that it would be much easier for us to negotiate a decent deal with our European friends than it is for the Conservatives, with a fairly brittle and at times toxic relationship in their negotiations.
The reason I ask the question is I'm wondering what the priority would be, whether it is the customs union, a customs union with the European Union, or whether it is the ability to be able to sign free trade agreements. And if they say no, if it can't be included in the bilateral agreement for a customs union, would you rather be in the customs union without that ability, or would you rather be outside of the customs union?
You know what I'm going to say. The priority is the economy and is jobs for people. And I'm not going to get into hypotheticals about people saying no to X, Y and Z. I think that is a mistake. But the difference between us and the Conservatives is really a difference of values about the kind of country that we want to be going forward. I would have thought that the Archbishop of Canterbury, for example, will be welcoming Jeremy Corbyn's speech tomorrow, because he shares our concern about this very unequal, very divided Britain, where the most vulnerable are crushed by austerity. I
thought that, protecting jobs and respecting the result of the referendum, I mean, they're entirely contradictory, aren't they?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It's not... Everything isn't about whether you're in or out of the European Union. The question now is what kind of relationship you have with your closest neighbours and what kind of a Britain you want to build post-Brexit. And that, I think, is what Jeremy Corbyn's going to talk about tomorrow. And our vision is a world away from that of the Tory party at civil war.
But in what way is it respecting the result of the referendum to enter into a customs union whereby we restrict our ability to do deals with the rest of the world?
Well, let's see what that looks like.
It's the great betrayal argument again about Labour, that you're not listening to your heartlands, you're not listening to the millions of people who support Labour who voted against the European
We
Union.
absolutely are, because we are leaving, and we absolutely are because, for example...
How is it leaving if you can't sign free trade agreements with the rest of the world? It's really confusing.
What I think people in our heartlands are really worried about is, for example, the posting of workforces to undercut their terms and conditions and their wages. What I think people in our heartlands are desperately worried about are housing and homelessness and austerity, and that's what
Brexit.
Yeah, but Brexit becomes an existential issue until you start talking about what it means for people, which is they want jobs. They want to benefit from economic prosperity and not see it only benefiting a very small minority of people in this country. And what Jeremy will do tomorrow is make this relationship between all the noise about Brexit and what really concerns people in their daily lives.
What's so wrong with the single market? I mean, just as Jeremy Corbyn is putting the finishing touches to tomorrow's speech, we've got Labour MPs, MEPs, peers, trade unionists, all suggesting that we should remain in the single market. What's wrong with it?
Well, we can't remain in the... It's back to your semantics. We're not going to remain in the single market. We're not going to be members of the European Union, but we want the closest possible relationship with our neighbours, whether it's on matters of trade, and we want access to that market. It's incredibly important for us and for our European partners, but also we want cooperation on security, on medicines control, on food standards and so on. And do you know what? I believe that most European leaders trust us when we say that, and it's a very, very different set of values from the Conservatives.
We've often heard in recent weeks and months that there's no place for anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. Is there a place for Ken Livingstone?
Well, obviously, I'm not judge and jury in relation to Ken Livingstone or anyone else. He has been suspended from the party for some time, but equally people report that he has said things and done things since that suspension. So that is something that the National Executive Committee of our party is going to have to look at.
Well, on that point, I mean, isn't it the case that no one has been judge and jury in the case of Ken Livingstone? The inquiry, announced by Jeremy Corbyn some 10 months ago hasn't even started.
Well, no, I mean,
what does that say about Labour Party's commitment to dealing with anti-Semitism?
Well, Ken is currently suspended from the party in relation to findings against him. And it's clear to me that before any prospect of him being allowed back into the party, subsequent matters need to be looked at. That is just due process. That is due process, and that's what I think we should follow. Okay,
but I mean, do you think that Hitler was a Zionist? I mean, do you know just how insulting?
No.
You understand just how insulting it was to see Ken Livingstone on Iranian television, of all things, on Holocaust Memorial Day, making those comments?
I completely condemn those comments. I completely condemn those comments. That they should be properly adjudicated on by the National Executive of the Labour
Sounded a bit
Party.
like you were being judge and jury there.
Well, I have my opinion, but other people have their opinions, and he is entitled to due process. That is very important when you're dealing with bad behaviour in any institution or political party.
Do you accept that your report into anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, maybe before you're a nobleman, of course, was considered a whitewash by many Jewish members of the party?
I know what people have said, but there are other people who've said they'd like to see that report fully implemented, and that's really what I'm working towards now. What we've seen is a change in standards. We've seen a more explicit change in standards, so that certain phrases and certain ways of talking about your fellow party members are now clearly ruled out in the party. That's clear. But what we need to do more of is to deal with this due process point. That's not just being fair to the person accused. That's being fair to the people who've been abused and making sure, as you've indicated, that they get earlier due process as well.
We learned this week that a change is coming for the ownership of the free press in this country, that Mr Corbyn wants an end to a handful of tax-dodging, foreign billionaires controlling the majority of newsprint. Given that the key principle of a free press is that it is free from state interference, how is he going to do that?
There's no question of state interference. I know that some newspapers have been worried about that and have suggested that this change is coming is a threat. It's not a threat.
So how is he going to do it then?
Well, the change is already coming because we, the people, are getting our news from a range of sources now. But the change that is coming in relation to billionaire tax exiles applies to people whether they're press barons or running other big companies. There is no attack on the... I've defended the free press all my adult life.
Indeed,
and I'm not going to change that position now.
So when he finalises those plans for dealing with pesky foreign billionaires, where will he announce it? On Russia Today or in Press TV?
Possibly via his own Twitter feed, because that is the nature of modern media now.
An American-owned social media network.
Well, I mean, I know, and that brings its own. I mean, that brings its own challenges. However, I mean, social media has a wonderful democratising possibility. Look at Stormzy and the way that he managed to mobilise all those people to express their concerns about Grenfell. There's a dark side too, and that's something that we often have to deal with. But I think the change is coming. The change, to some extent, has already come, and that's a good thing. And that should make it less possible for people to spread lies and smears and fake news, including about Jeremy Corbyn.
Indeed, Baroness Chakrabarti. Many thanks for being with us.
Thank you.